I'm gonna try to be half and half at the beginning because we have a translation. I think mostly of the people are from Mexico and Latin America region. Even we have people from Spain, and we have people from Colombia, and you have a full list of fans. So mostly people told me, "Oh, you're gonna be with Greg, perfect." So you're gonna see a lot of familiar faces and because you have come a lot to Mexico, and so you're not only a friend of Mexico, you're family of Mexico.
There you go. Good to see you, Rafa.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. So we have started our transmission. We have already Virginia Arana, Vicky from Yucatan meetings. Well, she was former from the Mexico Tourism Board. Is also a great friend of yours and of everybody. Hola Vicky, qué gusto saludarte, gracias por conectarte. Ahora Vicky está allá en Yucatán Meetings, en el recinto de Mérida, bueno, y en todo el proyecto de Meetings de Yucatán. Roberto Barth, Mendoza, Argentina, from Argentina, we have Roberto Barth. Muchas gracias, qué gusto saludarte, Roberto. Costa Rica, Baby Bonilla, qué gusto, hello Baby Bonilla. Alger from Grupo Presidente de hotels here, well, in many places in Mexico. San Luis Potosí, qué gusto, toda la República. We're having people from other places in the Mexico country, San Luis Potosí. Pues bienvenidos a todos en este lunes, ya iniciando el mes de junio. Y con este live talk de World Meetings Forum con un invitado especial, espectacular, Mr. Greg Talley. We're beginning our month, we're beginning June, and we have a special guest, Mr. Greg Talley, a great friend, a VIP guest for us. El tema de hoy para nosotros es Beyond the USA Market. Platicamos con Greg para decirle cuál sería el interés de tener esta conversación con él. Y pues la idea era que él nos pudiera dar un poco de cómo vemos el mercado de Estados Unidos hacia México y América Latina. We were talking about with you, Greg, that the thing about talking in this live talk, it was about understanding the U.S. market and how it's going to be the behavior with the Mexico and Latin American market. So many countries that are in this region work a lot with the corporates and with associations down there in U.S. and this is going to be the interesting about talking with you. I'm going to talk a little bit about your bio. I'm gonna make it on Spanish just to let them know who we are talking to. Les voy a compartir un poco de la biografía de Greg, una trayectoria importante. En 1987, Greg fundó Talley Management Group, Inc., después de una larga experiencia en el tema de asociativo y del manejo de eventos. Al igual que con una experiencia amplia en el marketing de destinos. Por 32 años, Talley Management Group ha proveído servicios de management y consultoría para las asociaciones, tanto en su manejo como asociaciones, como en sus eventos. Ha ayudado al lanzamiento de asociaciones como la African Society of Association Executive y Management. Y en 2018, Greg lanzó una compañía de management en un joint venture en África, basada en Nairobi, en Kenia y en la India, donde él tiene familia. Greg, adicional a toda esta amplia trayectoria que tiene de consultor y asesor y con su empresa, también ha servido como parte del board y presidente nacional de PCMA, la Professional Convention Management Association, y actualmente también es parte del board de la International Congress and Convention Association, ICA, donde actualmente colabora y nos ayuda en muchas cosas. Greg, thank you very much. Impressive bio. And I know this is a really small part of your experience. There's a lot of things you have been doing and a lot of trajectory with your company and yourself being part of the boards and helping a lot. We remember you a lot when you came to Mexico with the PCMA advisory boards. You work a lot and you help a lot Mexico to improve and be better with the U.S. market and international markets. And as I was telling everybody, you are not only a friend, you're family from Mexico. I'm gonna share with them a little message because we have a translation for this event. So les quisiera presentar la oportunidad que tenemos en esta ocasión de contar con traducción simultánea para este live talk. Les quiero recordar que este es nuestro primer live talk en inglés y tenemos el apoyo de Amtrad, una empresa que colabora con nosotros en World Meetings Forum, una empresa con una amplia trayectoria en materia de traducción. Ha estado colaborando en eventos de todas las tallas, internacionales, nacionales. Recientemente también lo vimos en el evento de Nobeles de Paz allá en Mérida, en Yucatán. Así que tiene toda la plataforma y toda la estructura para atender todos sus eventos. Así que no dejen de tener su traducción. Aquí abajo podrán ver dónde tienen que hacer esta comunicación para recibir su traducción y puedan disfrutar de esta conversación con Greg. Ahí lo tienen, Amtrad. Y bueno, pues empezamos. Todos los que ya tienen su traducción, ahí está el teléfono. Y recuerden, no se les olvide, durante toda esta conversación estaremos platicando con Greg Talley. Y acuérdense, tenemos una cita, recuérdenlo, ya es 1 de junio. Nos vemos el 31 de agosto al 2 de septiembre en Los Cabos para el World Meetings Forum. Vamos para adelante. It's a go. We're ready. So, Greg, thank you again. Welcome. It's going to be a pleasure to have this talk with you, talking about many things, especially as we talked recently. We want to understand, first of all, if you can share with us, how is your view? How do you understand? We know the bad news. We understand what is as we call right now, the COVID times, the coronavirus times. But in your experience, in your long career and your experience that you have been with associations and marketing in destinations, how is your perspective? How do you feel this is gonna feel? We understand many changes will come, but how do you are sharing with your clients and with your associations these kind of COVID teams?
Well, thanks, Rafa, and buenas noches to all of my friends south of the border. Great to be with you this evening. I mean, clearly, none of us have been through this before, so I think we're all trying to figure out what are the next steps and how do we come back from this and what is new normal looking like. There seems to be a whole lot of discussion right now about post-COVID, and that seems to imply that it will be over and we'll go back to something approaching normal. And I think our position really needs to be a little different than that. Even under the best case scenario, assuming we can get a vaccine tested, manufactured, and distributed, that's going to be a 24-month process at the earliest. There's just no way the world has ever done anything like that before. So to think we're going to move through this that quickly, I just don't think is realistic. So I think we're really looking at a middle period here that could actually be somewhere from 24 to 36 months, that we're going to be living in the state we're living in now, with the high degree of uncertainty that we're going to have now. And then, and only then, maybe we'll be dealing with something, either a vaccine or some other treatment that might be available. So the reality is we're in it. And we've got to figure out how we operate in this space now, because this is the space we're likely to be in. And then we've got to figure, what does that actually mean for those of us in the live event space? And what does that mean in terms of thinking about what our stakeholders are going to need and want in this new space? And that includes our organizers and our sponsors. So that could be in the corporate space. How are corporations reacting to this? Then in the association space, how are our leaders and associations reacting to it? But most importantly, out of all of this, it's going to be, how are our attendees reacting to it? And unless and until we actually deal with what their concerns are going to be about coming back into a live event space, the rest of us, like we've said, you can open up everything you want to open up, but that doesn't mean they're going to come. And the same thing happens for those of us planning live events. So I think we really have to kind of step back and think about what our attendees are going to be looking for. But that also means, and what I think we've come to realize in just the last 2 months, 3 months max, but what we're going to experience through the rest of this year, is the virtual genie is out of the bottle, and we're never going to get the genie back in the bottle. There will be behavior change out of this, both on the part of corporations in realizing how many meetings they don't necessarily need to do live anymore in terms of corporate travel within the country, but also around the world. And then, frankly, a lot of associations have started realizing they can produce virtual events, reach a greater number of people, and still make revenue targets and be net positive from virtual events. That's going to be tough to change when we come back from out of this, no matter what, because you're going to have the group of people that aren't comfortable traveling under any circumstances until there's a vaccine, whether they're compromised themselves or have other underlying issues or just don't like the sound of getting on a plane and traveling across borders. And then you've got the economic fallout from this, which I think is going to be long and prolonged, and that's going to have an impact on budgets. So we've got kind of the fear element, the health element, and the economic element that we've got to work our way through on this. And that's going to put a real challenge on destinations and organizers to figure out what now events are actually going to look like.
Really clear that introduction. It's we can understand the reality, and we have to face it. As we call, it's better to have the truth and manage with that, and trying to manage what do you think is going to happen, because that will take you nowhere. So we're receiving so many hellos from Costa Rica. Yadira Simon, well, you know, Mr. Eduardo Chaillo, Daniel Palomo, Perla Valdez from Monterrey, also saying hello. Gaston Ramos, also a great friend from the house. Ana Maria Vizcasillas, also, you know. So, well, this is a really good introduction for what is happening. The genie, as you call him, it's really, really nice to understand that, because every organizer of the live events should, as we talked to so many people, we understood that technology was there. We understood that it was living with us, but we didn't take a lot of attention to that. So these COVID times led us to anticipate like 5 to 10 years of technology to come right now. But still, so as we understand, you have clients on the management, on the associations, and you also provide your help with destinations. So both of those players are really critical right now, because you see so many destinations that are affected, and you see so many people organizing and trying to reorganize their events. So, but if we can start to say, and this is a question that many people have, live events will disappear? No. Technology will be with us? Yes. How do you think the percentage will be? How many live events will come to a lower percentage? How technology will be there? How this genie is gonna be more present? And how is the right approach to start working on that? Because, you know, people are in some cases are being scared and say, well, our live events will be gone. There's no, and in some cases, some people are not that negative and say, no, we have to live with technology. We have to learn to coexist with virtual spaces. Not all the time virtual spaces will be there. In the incentive market, we understand there cannot be incentives through technology. You have to go to the places to live your incentive program. But how do you think this percentage will be on these times?
Yeah, so I think it's an interesting question, and I agree that I don't think live events will ever end. But I do think out of all this, some underlying big questions are going to be addressed as well. The whole issue around sustainability, the number of events that were happening, and the numbers of people that were attending live events, particularly international events. I think that may fundamentally change forever. When you combine all of these issues with climate change, with the concern that was starting to build up about the travel in our space and the impact of that travel, I think you're going to see people really assessing the need for each meeting and the need for them to be physically at each meeting. And I'm a global traveler, have attended meetings all over the world. And I think there's going to be a lot of folks saying, is that the best investment of my time, my economic or environmental impact? And with the new virtual events coming that are going to combine elements of both, I think people are going to be able to say, you know, for what I needed to get there, I can do that virtually. But this meeting, I have to be there face to face. I think people are going to be much more discerning about which events they actually attend face to face because of the time, because of the environmental footprint, and because of the increasing technology that's actually making the virtual experience so much better than it ever was before. You now look at, you know, there are two reasons people attend live events. You go for the education and you go for the networking. We're pretty clear on how we can do education virtually, but even that's getting better in terms of the interactivity. The networking has been the big problem, but now you see all these software companies coming in and jumping into that space and creating some really interesting networking technology and opportunities that is creating the opportunity for me to have some serendipitous meetings, which we know is what it's all about. You're standing in a coffee line and you meet somebody, and next thing you know, we've got a project together. That sort of thing is starting to now be able to happen in a virtual space. So the challenge we're going to run into is in the next, let's call it 9 to 12 months, we're all going to be doing nothing but virtual meetings for all intents and purposes. Maybe some smaller hybrid meetings, as you heard Ika announce, where yes, if we can, and to the degree we can, have a live component, but the bigger portion of this is going to be virtual. That is going to allow this technology to really come right to the top, and it's going to allow us to see that we really are opening up the funnel. We're doing exactly what they always said about virtual meetings. We can have more people attend, interact with more people virtually than we ever can face-to-face. So now you start saying, so if the balance gets kind of way out of whack with more people virtual than live face-to-face, how and when does that start to balance back out, and will it? And I think that's where many more months of this, and you really do change behaviors and budgets with people saying, I'm not going to cross four time zones and give up a week of my life when I can come in virtually, get what I need in 2 days, and not go through the expense or the experience of traveling internationally to do that. That's our risk, I think, out of all this.
Okay.
The other piece I've heard that I think is even more concerning is in following the Association of Corporate Travel Executives, their poll on what they think is going to happen to corporate travel budgets is not good news for our industry either. They're talking about estimating between 30 to 50% decrease in corporate travel budgets, because what have corporations learned as well? We don't need to do all this travel to accomplish what we need to do. So those same corporate people are making decisions about corporate meetings. They're making decisions about sending people to my meetings, and they're making decisions about sponsoring my events. So this has so many multiple levels of impact that I think it's going to be a longer haul back for live events.
That's really interesting, because it seems that we're going to have to be prepared and we have to make another kind of congresses to understand this behavior for the new normal, for our industry, for our business industry. We have two questions regarding Ana María Vizcasillas. One is, how is your Español?
Not good enough.
And the other one, I think, is a really, really interesting question regarding our Mexico and Latin America region. Mm-hmm. What is, in your opinion, the greatest concern for PCOs from North America planning offshore of Latin America for delegates? Like, you know, I think many countries in the region of Mexico and Latin America depends a lot and see a lot of potential on the US market, but still with these kind of new rules and the thing that you're saying about corporate budgets and all this new normal, how do you think the behavior will be on this region?
Yeah, so I think it's a mixed bag, right? One of the things that worries me right now is looking at what is the new epicenter, as WHO calls it, for this disease, is Latin America. That is really concerning, and I think it is for all of us. I think it's concerning for the world. And I think that's still going to play out. And I do think that people, planners, and corporate executives will be looking for how did destinations handle COVID-19, because that starts to tell them something about the health and safety infrastructure in those destinations. And one of the outcomes of this entire thing is the level of risk that corporate compliance officers and association boards are going to be willing to take has really decreased out of all of this. So in terms of looking at destinations and assessing risk, I think that represents a really big challenge for Latin America coming through this, particularly if the numbers that we're seeing and the concern that's happening with the outbreaks continue over the next several weeks. So I think that represents a problem. On the flip side, I think there's going to be, as we've kind of all said, what's going to come back first? And multiple long hauls across oceans and multiple time zone travel is going to be the last thing that comes back. So you start saying, does this actually provide a bit of an opportunity for Latin America? Because US corporations and associations aren't going to be willing to go over the oceans that much immediately. Does that represent an opportunity for, if you want an international experience, we know there are great destinations south of the United States, and does that represent an opportunity for those destinations to really kind of get into the US market in a bigger way than they ever have before? But you've got to conquer the risk issue, and then from a destination standpoint, how do we deal with assuring the safety and health of attendees coming to a destination? And that's going to require a new level of partnership within the destinations and between the destinations and the organizers to convince the attendees that it is in fact going to be safe for them.
Okay, that's really clear. So it's going to be not that easy. As we understand, we're going to come back from the local to the regional to the international, talking about Latin America and America continent, and then we will see coming back the European and the APAC market. So that's interesting, the point of view. Let me say saludos desde Martín, que también ha colaborado con nosotros en World Meetings Forum. Ludi Guerra from Bern Hotels in Panama. Hola Ludi, ¿cómo estás? Fer Salcido de Groups to Go. Qué gusto que te conectas. Roberto Romero de Cancún, Global DMC Partners. Many fans that we're having here. We have... well, this interesting conversation. We have another question from our friend Eduardo Chaillo. Greg, there are so many people working in our live events industry. What do you think will happen with all those jobs? Will all of them have to learn new abilities? Well, this is a tough one also, right?
Yeah, but when you combine the effects, right, of everything that's happening to us, if corporate travel actually goes through anywhere near that kind of reduction, let's just take the low end, 30% reduction on corporate travel. And then you look at what else is happening in live event travel, and there are going to be hotels that simply are not going to be sustainable with the new numbers. And then you look at all the fall off jobs from that, and I think that's one of the reasons I think we've got a long slog to come back to wherever we were 2019 levels, because I do think there are going to be organizations and associations that aren't going to survive this. There are going to be hotels that won't survive this. I don't even know about the airlines at this stage of the game and who's going to survive this by the time everything's said and done. So I do think there is a total reorientation that's going to happen out of this, particularly if there is a recurrence or a second wave of this in the fall, or the longer we go to a vaccine. So I mean, I think that is the continuing risk for this. On the event side, I think the interesting thing and why there is some excitement is the opportunity here. How do we redesign events? How do we redesign live events in a way that accounts for, we know the audience is still there, we know there may be a bigger audience, how do we pull them in? And how do we continue to make our live events must attend while we build out the virtual component to make that as interactive as possible? That's kind of exciting. That really is kind of the brand new world for us.
Yeah, that's really, but it's going to be challenging because as we see, and you were talking at the beginning, even we understand they might be coming a vaccine, or if we have the medicines that this is kind of the new normal, we have to learn, because people are saying, hopefully we listen in the next months that COVID has been gone. Is that not going to happen? COVID is going to be and staying with us. We have to learn to live with the COVID. We have to learn to live our new normal. And in the live events or in the events, we have to understand all these best practices that we have to go through in the hotels, in the airports, and in every place, in the convention centers. But But I think it's really interesting to understand, because if we go separate on the associative market, on the corporate market, on the incentive market, even the trade shows or the exhibitions, some of them are also trying to analyze the kind of the new normal, because maybe on the meeting size or maybe in the congresses, you might have this kind of opportunity in the virtual or hybrid events. But when you come to some of the huge trade shows, maybe exhibitions in Germany, on those that are really, really the important for some industries, that's going to be challenged. We have another question here from Elizabeth Tovar from República Dominicana. Hola, Elizabeth, qué gusto.
Hola.
Don't you think LATAM should be looked country by country instead of a big block of problems? That's really, really kind of, because we understand our Latin America region, we are really warm and we are really happy people. But when it comes with data, how do you think this is a really good question?
No, absolutely. And that's where I said, I think the flip side is the opportunity, right? That I do think there are going to be destinations within Latin and South America that are going to be able to distinguish themselves from the rest of the competition, precisely because of that. So I do think you're going to want to break that apart country by country, because we know that there are going to be differences, and we know that destinations are going to react differently. And those that do react differently to this and can organize on a destination-wide basis to speak to safety, security, and health as a destination and approach the marketplace that way, knowing that that's the planner's number one concern now, are going to right away come up higher on a list than those destinations that just don't seem to get themselves together and be able to approach this dialogue in the right manner that we're going to expect. Because the other issue here is, given the fact that the tolerance for risk is very low, given the fact that as we come back to doing live events, we have no idea how many people are going to come. So I might have had a traditional event that drew 1,000 people. I have no idea what number are going to come as we start to launch that event again. But I can guarantee you, I'm not going to be willing to take on a lot of risk. Those destinations that say, we understand that, we want to partner with you, we're willing to look at the contract terms, we're willing to look at what we can do to make your attendees feel safe, and we want to do that on a destination-wide basis, those are going to be the destinations that are going to rise to the top, and there will be the destinations that do better. So there's definitely an opportunity here for destinations to distinguish themselves.
Perfect. We have saludos Roberto Can, el chino, ¿cómo estás? Former from Copa, and now he has his agency. It's nice to see you, Roberto. We have another question from a great friend, Juan Carlos Salomon. Do you believe cruise ship industry will survive the post-pandemic, since some reports tell us 60% of people are not likely to go on a cruise ship? Well, that's another tough one, because, well, everybody's talking about those places where, well, they're going to be kind of a little bit scared at the moment. And even the cruise ships were also working a lot in the meetings, right? Because we understood many cruise ships liners were trying to build up more events down there in their ships, right?
Yeah, so one of the fascinating data points that I find from all this is they have done a meta-analysis of the contact tracing around the globe. Where did the disease, where were the hot spots for transmission of the disease? The bad news for us is they were all large indoor gathering places where the vast majority of the infections took over. So that puts us in, again, a really tough position as an industry to figure out, okay, if that's the case and that data is knowable out there and people know it, how do we respond to that? How are we as an industry? How are our venue partners? How are our hotel partners, cruise ship partners, everybody going to respond to that to address that large concern? So, you know, this issue around social distancing, the issue around air quality and air circulation is becoming a bigger issue. So when we talk to venues now, that conversation is going to be very different. Tell me about airflow. Tell me, are we recirculating? What are you pulling in? How are we filtering it? So we're going to enter into conversations we never thought we need to have before about engineering in facilities, about how much fresh air is actually coming in. But I think the cruise ship industry is in particular going to be challenged, because what's happening? You have this huge number of people stuck in a very small space. Yes, there's some outside air, but look at all those interactions that are happening on board. Very different from a hotel setting in a city, in terms of where you can really step outside for extended periods of time and not constantly be in. And I think they're going to be challenged with that.
Yeah, yeah. And well, what I listen about one doctor, a specialist here in Mexico, is what he's saying about the challenges of the COVID, of this virus, is not even with the vaccine or the medication. It's because we don't understand really how does it works at this moment. All the doctors all around the world, what they are saying, at the moment we understand how is the movement of this virus, because in some countries it was with non-symptomatic, in other places was with this kind of symptomatic. So that's going to be the final result when this virus gives more data to the scientifics and to the health industry. That's going to be where everybody's going to be safe. Until that, we will have to take like this. There's another question, really interesting question from our friend Vicky Arana. I recently participated in a virtual expo with North American planners. Some mentioned that now they are considering to travel to Mexico for their incentives instead of India or long distance destinations from the US. Do you think Mexico will receive these clients, or they will wait until they can travel to India or Africa? Do you think the incentives travel will start at the same time of congresses or later?
Great. No, I think incentives will start sooner because they're smaller, they're definitely more manageable, and they're basically company paid, free. So I think they're going to start much sooner. And this is, I think, another market that I think Mexico and Latin America should really focus on out of the United States, because I think for all those same reasons, there's going to be reluctance to go too far. The other piece out of this is just plain watching countries lock down and borders close literally within hours. I think is going to make people very nervous about how far they fly. So I think that creates an opportunity for Mexico in particular, but I think for the Caribbean and further down Central America, because it is still a relatively close flight, that I think there's great opportunity in the incentive marketplace. And as I said, I think that will come back sooner.
Okay, so that's really interesting. How we separate also not even the region, but the segments. We have to look out the incentive, the congresses, the corporate, and those kind of events, how they're gonna be coming back, and the way we are gonna treat them, right?
Yeah.
We have Rebecca Berriochoa saying hello. Another question from Ana Maria regarding hotels. As a PCO, are you seeing evidence of hotels softening contracts terms, having so much at risk? This is also really
yeah.
if some of the hotels are here, they're gonna say, "Well, give us a chance a little bit."
Well, number one, it has been interesting. And we're still in it, right? I mean, everybody's still in the game. So we would have dealt with what was happening immediately in March, April, May, June. It just keeps going as this keeps going, and we're all caught in a very awkward, difficult position. And I think we're going to be paying a lot of lawyers to parse a lot of language on existing contracts, let alone new ones. Because as this keeps sliding, or even if we theoretically open up, we're left with the same issue. We don't know who's going to come for all those variables and reasons that I mentioned at the beginning of the show. So it's going to come back to the issue about risk. And where am I going to do business? I'm going to do business with those hotel chains that understand that and are willing to be flexible with us as we all step back into this together. It's going to take all of us. But if anybody thinks we're going to be willing to sign an 85% attrition fee, food and beverage minimums based on some wild number anymore that we were doing, they're out of their minds. That's not going to happen. No board is going to let us do it. And no corporate officers are going to let you do it. So we're in a new ballgame. And those hotels that are willing to play, I think will form a great partnership and go forward. But those that don't or think it's business as usual, just not going to remain good partners.
This is going to set a new normal even for that kind of things, for contracts with hotels and for the agreements with the convention centers. In the US, do you know if this is going to be called kind of an act of God, the pandemics or COVID, or how they are trying to manage when you go to the contract, they will say, well, if this is an act of God, or, well, sorry.
Yeah, that's one reason why we're going to be paying a lot of lawyers for a long time to answer those exact questions. And I think, we're also, that's a product of US, just our litigious society, and it's a challenge, and I apologize for that. But I think you're going to see it almost impossible to get insurance for cancellation insurance for this sort of thing anymore. And what does that leave insurance for, frankly? I don't know. Then you come back to act of God, and if it's excluded, officially excluded, where does that leave us? So I think this presents a really troubling case, particularly because the epidemiologists that I speak with, and I've worked with them for years, say we think this is another new normal, that because of urbanization, because of the growing population, and because of climate change, we think we're going to see more of this rather than less. So if that's the case, the insurance companies are going to go running for the door on anything that would require them to pay out for this sort of thing. So that tells me that, again, we're entering a different phase, that we as an industry are going to have to figure out how we're willing to work together under these scenarios. And is this going to be something that's based on some percent of your attendance that isn't able or willing to travel because of external factors? That's going to key something. So I think we're going to have to end up inventing some of this ourselves, because I don't think you're going to be able to get insurance.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, and as we say, so many people that are making businesses all around the world, even hotel companies that they have to manage how they're going to open in different countries, because the new normal for other countries are going to be different, and they're going to change some laws, and they're going to change some of the procedures to reopen. So I understand that. There's another question here from Linda Garzon. What do you think will be the new business model for the PCO and DMC?
So that's been definitely a topic of discussion amongst my colleagues in the PCO space, and certainly recognize from the DMC a similar issue. My advice to some colleagues and friends was, you better have a couple of stiff cocktails and then start brainstorming about who else does your unique ability, your unique skill set in financial management, in project planning, in data management, how else and who else could benefit from that unique skill set? Because I'm not sure you're going to be able to make a living thinking it's coming back quickly in the live event space to what it was or what your business is built around. So I really urge them to look more broadly at where those skills could be applied. For those that know my company, we've been an association management company for that entire time. It is still the majority of our business, and then a portion by serving those clients and others is in the event side. So for us, the bread and butter is the full association management. But even for some of my PCO colleagues, I've said that's where you should be looking. What associations in your countries, in your space, could use that kind of management support and that kind of management expertise, and that might be a way to go. But I think it's problematic. I think it's problematic for any company that was based 100% on live events. I think is going to be challenged as we go through this.
Yeah, because talking with some other meeting planners, agency, PCOs that are in between the final client and the organization of events, the model was they can have more profits having around all the services in the live events. In the case, because when you have the management of an association and the associations might live, they have a really good income from the event, but they can live with the memberships, and they can live with other kind of educational issues, and that will be no trouble even to pay a management company like you for association. But if it's an independent association that they will have like 60-70% of their income through the event, they're going to be they will have to change their model of incomes through membership. Something like that can be a suggestion you can have, or
well, exactly. There's going to be organizations that won't survive it. Just can't see how to reorient themselves differently. I mean, in the case of U.S. associations, most folks know on average, live events represented 30 to 50% of their operating revenue. That's a huge, huge cut, needless to say, unless you figure out a way to fill that very quickly. Now, our data is showing you can fill that quickly with virtual events. You do not have to give it away. People will pay for content. So the idea is, how quickly can you actually flip? And that's what you're seeing a lot of associations do and have had to do this spring, but now into the summer and into fall, is how do you flip your live event into a hybrid event or into a virtual event? How do you keep your stakeholders happy? How do you price? How do you maintain your profit level? It can be done. It requires agile management and leadership. And that's not necessarily a hallmark in the association space, which is used to moving at a little slower pace and doing things very similarly year over year. So those organizations that can make that change quicker, recognize the opportunity, look at better collaborations, I think are going to be the organizations that survive this and can be innovative and can take their members with them. We're all going through this together, but our value proposition is still the same, or should be. We're here to provide value to you as members, and here's how we're going to do it.
Okay. And if you have to go one or the other side, because you told about the two most important data that reveals that people are coming for live events because of content, because of educational programs, and because of the networking. If you go down to the virtual side, to the only delivery through technology, which would you bet more on, delivering content and pay for content, or deliver on networking platforms and charge for that? If you have
what I think is kind of interesting is that's what I see changing right now. What it's been, as you look over the model that we've been playing with virtually for the last probably 10, 12 years, has been content delivery. And that's getting better and better and better. And we're all living through that today with this, with Zoom, with you name it. We're all living and learning how to do it. The place that I see the biggest room for growth, and therefore, depending on if you're asking me as an investor or asking me as an event organizer, but where I see the biggest room for growth is in this networking technology. But there is some really good stuff out there now, and I think there's more coming that it will come as close as possible in the virtual space to creating networking opportunities that are meaningful. And when you start putting that together, you're really starting to get closer to what everybody's looking for, because you can extend that into the trade show experience or into the commercial space for business exchange. You can use that to make that happen as well. So you're getting closer and closer to kind of unlocking the last negatives to why we needed to be face-to-face, other than for the human interaction that we know how important that is. To sit down across from each other, look each other in the eye, see full body language, and be able to have an in-depth conversation. And that's still hard to do no matter what. Okay.
And in the matter of the content, we have a question here. How would you train your community to pay for content, since we are used to get it for free when it's virtual?
Yeah, great question. And I think to a large degree, it depends upon your audience, what field you're in, who your audience is, and what that content and relationship is. So for many associations, there hasn't been free content. In other words, there was either always a charge for it, or if it was free, it was really bite size. But if we're going to be delivering the annual meeting again, and that level of content was available, it's unclear to me why there would be an expectation that should be delivered for free. If you used to register to pay for it to attend, why wouldn't you register to pay for it now? So I really flip that back on its head and just say, why is that expectation there? And in fact, if that was allowed to get created, well, now you've got to undo it, because the fact of the matter is you are delivering value. And that's then maybe what you need to measure and be able to discuss from evaluations of past events where you have charged that there was recognition that value was being delivered, therefore it's worth being paid for.
Okay, yeah,
but because that could vary sector by sector and audience by audience, because it really depends who are you, who is your audience, and how much do they value what you're giving them.
Yeah, I think we in the Latin America region specifically, we struggle a lot with that, because we make, COCAL makes a great event in Mexico, all the Mexico chapter of MPI, of PCMA, everybody makes a lot of great events, but at some point people are just saying like, well, it has to be free, or I have to come. And some of the things that scare people or scare associations or scare groups is like, I'm scared that nobody will show up to this event. So sometimes it's that kind of challenge on letting know, because the content is great and we have a lot of people. And when we used to have the Mexico Tourism Board, they used to bring a lot of the advisory board from PCMA, and all the time bringing people with a lot of leadership and giving a lot of value. So I think for speaking about the region, I think we have that kind of challenge, right?
Mm-hmm. You know, and I think then the issue is, you know, how do you up the game from a content standpoint, right? So then you've got to say, okay, yeah, we do have to kind of undo it now because we were providing it for free. Now, how do we make sure the content is even more relevant, is even more of value to who the attendees are going to be, and then let's start charging for it. You gotta kind of start somewhere, and that's going to sort itself out. This is where competition between organizations, you know, comes into play. And if either competition or collaboration, and maybe both, particularly in our own industry. Right now, you can clearly say our industry associations are more important than ever as we all try and figure this out together. So it may be time to stop worrying about competition. Let's come together. Let's build amazing programs to help our collective members, and let's make it clear we can't do this for free. We don't exist if we do it for free. So I think there's got to be some recognition here on both sides that we need to do something as an industry, and for it to work, we need everybody at the table.
Yeah, that's for sure. We have a question from Daniel Palomo. Due to the current uncertainty with COVID-19, will strategic planning for DMOs completely change? Will risk management and scenario planning become more relevant?
Yeah, thanks, Daniel, and hello to Houston. So all of my DMO friends, I know how painful this has been, particularly in the U.S. marketplace where their budgets are so dependent on the hotel taxes. So I know scores of cities that have laid off 30, 50, 70% of their staff. I do think this changes radically potentially the role of DMOs in their destinations. When you look at in so many destinations, what the traditional structure has been. So you've got a Chamber of Commerce, you've got the DMO, you've got economic development, you've got all these different entities, many of whom had memberships, were driven by memberships. How many of them are going to see those membership bases get absolutely decimated by 30, 40, 50%? So that tells me this presents an opportunity. And that's what I think about this whole thing. Yes, there are challenges. Yes, it's going to be a struggle. But in this are opportunities. So in destinations, particularly destinations that are driven to a large degree by tourism or business events, is there an opportunity to really reorient the role of that DMO within that destination more towards economic development? Can there be better collaborations with other partners now that we're all in a time of need and something has to change? You know, never let a good crisis go to waste. This does present opportunities in communities to look at things differently and see if there aren't different roles for DMOs. But absolutely, I know a lot of them are starting to look at what should we be? What could we be now in this new environment going forward? And I think that represents opportunity.
Okay. Well, Greg, thank you very much. Our time, it went really quick. We need 2 more hours with you and to continue this.
And I need a cocktail like you have, Rafa.
Oh, well, I'm having water on a small glass, but hopefully, as Ana Maria says, cocktails and brainstorm. That's gonna be our next agenda. We will have cocktails, brainstorm, and a little bit of tequila or margarita.
Great, count me in, Rafa. I will definitely be back for that.
Yes, for sure. But we want to thank you really your time and being part of this light talk of the World Meetings Forum. It's really great to have your content and all this conversation with these great questions. We know we understand on a new normal. We're living on a new normal, but it's really amazing that even you know that really good Mexico and Latin America region, you have a lot of people knowing you and you understand what we are trying to go through. So we understand this is a global issue, but mostly that you understand Mexico and this region, Latin America, is really impressive to have you here. Thank you very much for your time. I'm sure we will see you again. We will see you soon. We will gather together again, even with the safety precautions. It doesn't matter as long as we see everybody with the distance, having a cheers. But thank you very much, Greg, for your time.
Gracias, Rafael. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Gracias a todos los que se conectaron con nosotros. Gracias a todas las personas de América Latina que estuvieron aquí con nosotros y esta conversación con Greg. Recuerden, tenemos una cita importante, 31 de agosto al 2 de septiembre en Los Cabos, el World Meetings Forum. Estaremos ahí compartiendo con ustedes muchas cosas de nuestra nueva normal, de nuestra nueva realidad, con mucho contenido y sobre todo, pues, para seguir haciendo un networking que ayude a nuestra industria a salir adelante. Muchas gracias. Gracias a Amtrak, nuestro gran patrocinador de esta conversación, de nuestra traducción. Gracias a todos. Cuídense mucho. Una excelente semana. Have a great June. Tengan un excelente junio. We're almost there. Be patient. Everybody, we're going to make it in the meetings industry.